Well, this was 9 years before MIDI.
Yeah.
And his system was not close large enough to generate that in real time, and there would be no way to sync it if you used other tracks.
Syncing everything.
There was like 3 performances of it in the film
Yeah.
I just watched.
So, yeah.
And the control tracks enabled him to do that. And let me explain this really quickly, because I don't want to glaze anyone over, but he was given an 8-channel Ampex,
Netflix, yeah.
Ampex 880. But he only used 4 channels for sound. Cloudless Sulfer was originally commissioned through JBL for the christening of their huge facility in the valley. It was like 500,000 square feet or something. And it was for multi-channel. He's a bugle guy, so it's quad. And the other 4 channels were used for control tracks, in which simple tones,
Just a sine wave, just sine waves.
yes, and clocks as a click track were fed into the bugle through a thing called an envelope follower, an envelope detector, and it would enable him to sync channels one after another, okay? And he used it not only for timing, but for spatial location, which was a huge part of Mort's music. And that's the beauty of it.
Is that what the sine waves were doing?
Yeah, what he would do is he would feed sine waves into what Buchla called a comb filter, which is not what a comb filter we understand it to be. It was a fixed filter bank. But instead of having attenuators on that filter, there was a non-attenuated output. So if your frequency was in this certain band, it would come out there. So he could decode it. He could put, he says 20, I'll give it 10 tones on one track, put it through the comb filter, and decode that into 10 different control tracks.
Do you debate that?
No, that's true. That's true. I don't even remember. I don't remember doing 10. I don't remember.
Yeah, I remember 4.
Yeah.
But when his non-such years, he was a master at splicing, right? It took a lot of time. He spliced finished pieces that were already mixed, and the razor blade doesn't have an undo button. It came out wonderfully. He had a real knack for it, but he replaced that when he got the Touch record. Although it was still a Buchla 100, Don had delivered the envelope followers and the source of uncertainty. There might have been another one that was free, 200 modules as they developed, and that's how he started fooling around with control tracks in a minimal sense on Touch, but with Sidewinder it was completely pre-composed to the point where he would spend 6 months on the control tracks and record the piece over the weekend. He did that with, believe it or not, with Cloudless Sulfer. Yeah.
It's something that's interesting is that now he's taking those original control tracks and feeding them into Ableton.
Right.
And he's using Ableton as a control tracks. And I said to him, well, are you using them, you know, in conjunction with the automation? And he said, no, he's not. He's using them like they were originally.
Like feeding them to the 200E system that he's using?
Well,
The 200E doesn't have the same kind of envelope detectors. It doesn't have a gate out, and I think it's because Don assumed you'd be doing that with MIDI. So it wasn't such a big thing. But if there are any music technologists out there, you can understand what a task it is to have a non-human sync from track to track. If you're the Beatles, you just play with headphones in time, but you tell a synthesizer to do that. Matter of fact, I have a relationship with Wendy Carlos, and she listened to some of Mort's music, and she didn't grok how he was doing that, because she is all about this, right? And she was fascinated to the point where, you know, the system played itself. I mean, it was all basically automated. Yeah.
He mentions in the movie that he has a hard time working with other people. You know, he's like, I've tried to work with a lot of other people. I've got like a small group of people that I've actually gotten on with. How did you find working with him?
I was surprised to hear him say that in the movie.
Really?
Yeah, I was surprised to hear him say that. Were you surprised?
I don't know. I would have, if he would have asked me to get a copy of it.
Right, yeah, me too. I was such a fangirl.
That was our job, and it was a wonderful education. Yeah.
So you both have been fully exposed to at least the first 2 or 3 albums before
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Cal Arts.
Yeah.
An interesting story, he just told me last week, he never had a record contract with Cloudless. It was a record by record deal. So, as Jack Hulsman talked about, he took a chance with Silver Apples. It sold 40,000 copies. I mean, that's outrageous for a classical album. So they gave him another deal. They only were gonna do 4 new music projects a year. I remember one of them was this Andrew Rudin, a Moog record named Tragiodia or something. It by comparison wasn't very good. And Columbia wanted him at the beginning. He turned them down, and then I think he felt limited by Nonsuch. So he went to Columbia, who did give him a record package, but they cut him out after Until Spring, that was a real, Until Spring and Cloud Sulfer are 2 of a set. And when Mort started really writing music, and I don't want to go into it, maybe if you want me to, I will, but it was not so much information, it was tuned, finite, composed parts, like almost like a string quartet done with electronics. They took to him back. He released Until Spring. He got a phone call, be in New York in 2 days. We'll pay for your ticket. We need to see you in a meeting for lunch. And he was worried he was gonna get sacked. But he talked to his connection in Columbia, and when he got there, he said, don't worry, they fire you at breakfast meetings. It's a lunch meeting, you're okay. He said, I didn't sell that well, He had sold 20,000 copies, and he said, you can't ever tell anyone this, but we released a Stockhausen album and sold 500 copies. Yeah, so you're good. Yeah.
Do we have any questions from the audience members?
Okay.
Don't be shy. Depends on how loud you are.
Okay. In the film, there's the concert that he does in Berlin, along with a younger artist who's several generations divorced from him, who's coming at this sort of electronic performance from a techno angle. I'm curious because you guys were working with him late 70s, and I was unaware of his work before seeing this film, but there's parts of certain compositions that are played that sound like acid, that sound like this Detroit techno music.
Sure.
That's decades later. From your guys' work, was there this sense that these were latecomers, or that these were like people cribbing the aesthetics of futurism, but doing something that's really more basic than that? What was your sense about that?
This is a hard one, and after
I think that at that time, there were other things that were going on, like Captain Beefheart, for example. There was sort of, and you could listen to Captain Beefheart and you could wonder where that came from. Did that come from, an avant-garde aesthetic, or did it come from a rock and roll aesthetic? Things were kind of more mushed together. It drew on each other very, just wildly. So no, I certainly didn't think, I think it was all meant to be all mixed together and all draw on each other. I'm always surprised that there's not more atonal synthesizer stuff. It's become, I don't know.
I think there is, it's just that record companies don't exist anymore, so distribution isn't there. That's my feeling.
Yeah, that's good.
But there's a lot of new artists that really drew on Stockhausen and Mort. Richard Devine, anyone ever hear his music? Yeah, he can wax poetic about the compositional technique of those composers in an eloquent way. He thoroughly understands it, and it's reflective in his art, right? Then there's other guys like Ben Frost. Anyone know him? Icelandic guy. Amazing, right? But it completely divorced from Mort's aesthetic. So I don't know. I don't find as much. I find it. I listen to imitations, but like Divine was able to take that information and create something new with it, right? So there's the challenge, right? So, I mean, I hear a lot of younger composers that it's all a journey, right? And it takes a while for you, especially in something as kinetic as music and as traditionally defined as experimental or esoteric music, to find a way. And you can hear it in younger composers' work where they haven't found it yet, and they don't yet maybe understand what the components of musicality or music may be. There's a part of this film that was cut out where Joan was talking about something I became aware of on my own that Mort was using, is that electronic music is like an orchestra, but you are defining the instruments. You're not classified. It's not quantized to clarinets, flutes, brass. You invent your instruments, and then as a composer, you use that palette of sound to create a piece of music, okay? And that takes experimentation. That process he did talk about.
Consider the work that Peter's been working with Tool.
I polish their Grammys, that's all I do.
No, he doesn't. And he's built the toolbox, the synthesizer that they take on the road, and Danny Carey works with. So this seems to me like a very organic.
Well, I guess that's an example. Yeah, that's an example. Yeah. His motivation was Billy Cobham's first solo album, Spectre, I think. Spectrum, in which he plays with what sounds like an ARP sequencer, and he was motivated by that. Now, thank you, God. Danny's a wonderful guy, gives me complete creative freedom. I do most of the sound design, and I dump this on him, and that's where his genius comes in, because he puts it together to be an 8-minute piece of music, and it's never the same 2 nights. So I've given him the palette, and so it doesn't have to be the same thing every night, and but it would be nothing without him.
And Danny also has one of the most incredible collections of vintage synthesizers that I think on the planet. It's incredible.
You should get him to get me over there.
I'll get you over tomorrow. I mean, right here.
Y'all heard that.
There we go, buddy.
That's tomorrow.
So, he's got if you put it linearly, it'd be 15 feet of EMU. Half of it I helped him get. It was the system, one system he acquired somewhere, and the other was from the University of Texas at Austin, Russell Pinkston. They weren't using it, it was in a closet. He has 9 feet of Moog modular. He has one of the best equipped Buchla vintage 200s I've ever seen. Usually, these poor guys, because they're so rare, this is before Roman and the clones, okay? There'd be an oscillator, a filter, a low pass gate, and 16 mixers. And there's my booklet, Danny's is much different. Yeah.
Roman and the Clones is not a band. Roman makes Buchla module clones.
Which are now part of Buchla. It's no longer, if you're worried about being politically correct, you don't have to worry about it.
He's been brought into the fold.
Yeah, he's gone into the fold.
You have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Morton said that it took him like 13 months or something to do something like Silver Apples of the Moon. So I'm wondering, is he spending most of his time finding the sounds, and is it just like a live-to-tape performance that he's doing, and he's doing a bunch of stuff and then he's editing it together? What's that process like? Why does it take 13 months to do like 4 tracks essentially? They're like 40 minutes total, right?
Yeah, his process surely changed in time. He took advantage of the novelty. This is not taking anything away from his brilliance, because his sound design was on another planet, right? That's why my jaw dropped. I mean, I had heard Sign on Sign FM. Stockhausen did it, but not like Mort did. and not with that gritty percussive, that energy, the animal of his sound sculpture, and his taking into account all parameters of sound, most importantly, spatial location, which gives it movement. When he got into the digital, he amplified that using Doppler effect panning, right? And you can really feel it. So I don't doubt that he was working 13 hours. Whatever in his mind, however he developed the timbral pairing of these sounds, why they complement one another so much. Okay, but it was wild. It was a lot of different timbres. But if you notice, sidewinders, subdued. For butterflies, I think the first movement with those pitched noise sounds is one of the most brilliant pieces of music ever written. But he started writing etudes. It was simple. And then until spring happened and Sulfer, and he was writing traditional music with a band of instruments that he invented. I mean, Until Spring is theme and variation, straight out of the book, right? So he probably, I don't know, out of he'd been there, done that. It was time to get rid of the sound effects and the calamity. He created calamity through more constructive ways, okay?
So I think one reason it was so time intensive, or is so time intensive, is he's not improvising. He's crafting each little sound and each little gesture, and he's tweaking the living daylights out of everything.
Right.
So when he talks about doing like a painting and reworking it, I think it's time intensive because it's not. He's not, just setting up a patch and letting it go. He's every little sound.
And is that something, because it's so specific, and is that something you can ever replicate, or is it like
Sure.
you can like exactly as is, or it's going to always be different?
He replicates. When he plays live, it's not exactly replicated every time. In fact, it is replicated, but there's a lot of variation. Which
Yes,
is great. There's a lot of variation. It's not like he presses the button and it just goes. And he builds that in, I think.
There was a snippet of the beginning of Silver Apples of the Moon that was like a more recent performance, and it sounded really similar to the original.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I have one more? Sorry, little
Sure,
quick one.
please.
How many at that time? How many physical buchlas were there, and were there any other albums at that time that were using the same
Sure.
instrumentation that sounds?
There were three Buchlas. There were two studios that basically had Buchla 200, so there's a footnote to that I'll get to. And then there was a third studio that had a Buchla 100 that nobody would want to look at because we had the 200s, okay? The systems now, Grant Richter, wire synthesizers, anybody? Graham Richter has one of the 200s. I know where the other 200 is. It's in a private collection. I can't talk about that, okay? But there were those two systems. The second Buchla 200 was actually a 500 because it was interfaced with an interdata computer that Jill programmed with toggle switches to put the operating system in, okay, right? When you booted it up.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine 8-bit words, binary, on toggle switches, load, okay, and there was a teletype machine do programming, and that would create pulses and voltages, right? Or was it just pulses?
I don't remember.
It was, you could do envelopes with it. I don't know what the
I have
staircase
PTSD from
room.
that.
How many records were actually made on these machines like that?
Well, Barry Schrader was another composer. Here's the thing. I talked to, David Rosenboom is here. He's in the movie. It's very intimidating, David, to speak because he's one of the most intelligent guys I know, okay? But we were talking about this. When I got to CalArts, I thought I'm gonna be the next big thing. Little did I know that opportunity had already left. There was nobody that was gonna get a big contract for esoteric experimental electronic music anywhere ever again, okay? Thank God my parents didn't figure that out because they were paying for this whole thing, but that's the truth. We had the German influence with Tangerine Dream and Schultz and all that. That was much more homogenized than Mort stuff.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah, but Barry Schrader at that time was another example of amazing Buchla 200 music. You can hear it. He's released on Indigo Records. He's also on Bandcamp and Apple Music. Couldn't be any more different than Mort stuff, okay? But he has 2 analog records, one called Lost Atlantis and the second called Lost Analog. It's all Buchla 200 music. There was Ingram Marshall. Who else? Well, I guess James Tenney, and Hal didn't do anything on this booklet. But I know Tenney was, but,
Yeah.
and some of the Columbia music, Pearl Smiley, there was a Buchla 200 small one at Columbia, Lukashevsky brought it in. Matter of fact, when Mort got rid of his 200 and embraced the Yamaha, he gave that system to Vladimir. Yeah.
I think we have another question over here.
I have a couple. Hey guys. The first one is, Peter, you were just talking about there being a single Buchla 100, but I remember that we had a Buchla 100 at San Francisco State in the electronic music department, and then of course we had another one at Mills. So.
Oh, no, I meant there was another one at Cal Arts.
At Cal Arts, okay, fair enough, thank you.
Yeah.
And tying this whole thing together, I would love for you guys to talk about the version of Sidewinder that you recorded at Danny's studio,
Oh,
and the
okay,
fact
all
that
right.
you're about to come and perform it here again.
Oh, just to go back to the Buchlas, for one, right before we go to that, Mort also got me my first studio gig just when I was graduating, and it was to work on a music with this composer Jack Nietzsche, and it was a movie called Hardcore starring George C. Scott, and I rented one of the Buchlas from Cal Arts and dragged it down to Warner Brothers. And it was at the 300? From 303?
It was BQO3, it was a 200.
Yeah, it wasn't the one with the computer, but it was the other one. And dragged that thing down to Warner Brothers and set it up down there.
I can't believe you pulled it out, but that just didn't happen. Yeah, Mort moved it once. He had a live performance at the, what was it?
It's
Hotel that was
magic
in
of
the.
a movie budget, that's what it was.
Yeah, that's what it was. Joan LaBarbera called me when the roulette, Mort turned 90. He just turned 91 3 days ago. But he turned 90, and in
Last year, this.
April, they were going to have an event at a theater that's in the movie called the Roulette in Brooklyn. Would you like to come out and do something? Well, yeah, I love Mort. I hate to fly. So anticipating that, she said, would you like to contribute something on video? Jill and I have been discussing trying to do a live adaptation of Sidewinder for years, and this was our excuse to do it. And it turned out really well. We filmed it in Danny's and Tool's studio, not for the ambience, although that really helped the visual effect. We wanted to use the 200 he has. Danny will let me take anything out of that place, but not the 200, okay? They have the API to Rick James recorded Super Freak on. I could probably take that out of the room, but that 200 doesn't go anywhere, so we came to it. It's on YouTube, just search Sidewinder Live and you'll see it. It's big white letters and you can see it. And I thought it turned out really well. And we're performing it, we performed it in San Francisco in October, and we had this wonderful opportunity to perform in this room, and you will all be there, right? Yeah, on the 31st.
It does sound really good in this room.
Yeah.
It'll sound great, yeah.
Yeah.
Peter did a gorgeous graphic score for us to follow, and even though it's not every note is exact, definitely every event is in the right place.
Oh, you know, and we were not trying to replicate, we were interpreting.
Yeah.
Kind of had two rules. We either replicated his timbres, but took it in our own direction, or we invented our own timbres and took it in his direction. That was kind of a rule. I don't know if that translated. You know, people tend to
It's a lot of fun to play.
think liner notes, right, that make us all seem like geniuses. We just did it and it sounded pretty good. Okay.
That's awesome.
Do we have any other?
When Mort taught classes at Cal Arts, did he exclusively use the Buchla systems, or did he occasionally use the surge systems as well, or other synthesizer
The
brands?
surge systems were not there.
Yeah, they weren't there.
Surge, they showed up much later.
Yeah.
But if you want to use a bunch of old Surge, we have a bunch at the Vintage Synthesizer Museum.
Both Peter and I both went after and then worked at Surge's.
Yeah.
And at Hollywood and Western.
We got a student discount and we got an employee discount.
Yeah.
And that's why everyone, Gary Chang, everyone,
Yeah.
matter of fact, Daryl Johansson had one, and that's the one that ended up at CalArts.
You take as little money as you could possibly live on and take all the rest in modules.
Gary Chang was living there for a while.
I think we all did a little stint living there.
And Gary went on to an amazing film career. I mean, his first film soundtrack was The Breakfast Club, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
And it went up from there, yeah.
During that period of time, suddenly a lot of pioneers in electronic instruments suddenly emerging, and I was wondering how everybody see each other during that scene, and like David Smith, Bob Moog, and like East Coast and the West Coast, they all have their own logic designing various instruments. And was there any like commercial breakthrough for like commercial hiring Morton to do the avant-garde sound of those?
Well, that was a collaboration with Don. Don was very his feeling was if you want to do keyboard music and make it sound like a clarinet, hire a fucking clarinet player. Okay, he didn't want to do what was done before. And he designed his instruments so it was really hard to do that. I mean, we had touch plates, but later with the 200, they were kind of arranged in an equal-tempered manner. But we just had linear plates. We could tune the voltages on each. And I remember when I needed to use traditional Western total structure, I would always play Somewhere Over the Rainbow because it has an octave somewhere, and I would tune the stupid thing to make sure it was tuned right. That the divisions were correct within an octave. Okay, but look, I knew both those guys. Bob Moog was a great man and a brilliant engineer. He wasn't a creative mastermind. He admitted it. He built things for people to play, mostly in the rocket in, right? Wendy was an exclusion of that. Don was an avant-garde artist before he even picked up a soldering iron, and it was Mort's approach to non-traditional orchestration and timbres, and Don's refusal to fit into those confines that created that instrument. I mean, it wouldn't have been the same without Mort. It definitely wouldn't have been the same without Don. It was a perfect union.
I think that also the East Coast, West Coast thing is sort of a later construct that in retrospect, people looked and said, oh, there's an East Coast and a West Coast thing going on. Because I chose my undergraduate school because they had a Moog 3P. And people were making maybe more loopy, like Terry Riley or Steve Reich stuff.
You're absolutely. We were influenced by West Coast minimal music and drums more than East Coast guys.
I think so. I think so. But that to me that was a really recent construct. I
Yeah.
never
You can
really
still
thought
get
of that.
really weird with that Moog 3P, I'm sure.
You can do
Yeah.
plenty of weird stuff
Yeah.
with that. Yeah. And then later on, I worked with this composer, Jack Nietzsche, and he had a Moog 3P. The Moog 3P that had been used in this movie starring Mick Jagger called Performance.
Oh, yeah.
And I had it, so Jack
Talking
didn't.
about the Candies.
Yeah, I was going to. A weird story is I had that thing in my apartment in Sherman Oaks, and for years, and the pots were dirty. And so I was going to pull the thing apart, and I was going to spray stuff and clean up the pots a little bit. And I opened this thing up, and in the back of the filters, there are these wads of chewing gum with birthday candles stuck in them, and they're like halfway burned down. And it's like, what? And to this day, I have no idea where it was from. I can't answer the question. I have no idea what that was all about. But
So there's bubble gum and birthday candles in the back of Moog modules, and there's LSD in the back of Bupa modules.
Which one's cooler? Which one's cooler? Come on.
Settled. The East Coast, West Coast debate. That's been finished now.
There was a rumor, I don't know if it's true, that Don Buchla was the Grateful Dead's Acid Connect. I don't know if there's any.
And he's mentioned in the electric Kool-Aid acid test.
Okay.
Like, you know, when they're talking about the Grateful Dead and
Right.
the
Yeah.
events they're doing.
Go ahead, sir.
There's a little note I would like to say about that Jack Ritchie PP mode. It was used by Roger McGann of the Bird, and it was also used by Mick Jagger to compose or try to compose the invocation of my demon brother for Kenneth Anger. So that explains the candles in the back, you know. So probably that was, sort of, a ritual that was made, you know.
Interesting.
And, yes.
Isn't that interesting?
For the most part, since Subotnick conceptualized the modular synthesizer as a way of democratizing music, at least the recording process, would you say that for him at least, he's achieved that goal? Is that still a goal he's trying to reach? Or is that an individual process for each musician?
What Mort has said is he has finally arrived at what he was always after, in which you could be the conductor of real-time music that would
Yeah.
never be the same. And that's what he tells me he was always after.
Yeah, we talked about that
And he
today.
needed technology to do that. We weren't there in the 70s, not by a landslide.
So for the most part, though, you feel that Morton's achieves his goal of having anyone able to express their ideas completely, whether it's an idea that's been conceived by someone else or something that's inconceivable. The technology now exists for someone to express themselves on that canvas.
I would say so. I mean, that was one reason Serge was brought in.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Yeah,
yes,
go ahead.
it's that Serge's idea of the people's synthesizer, which is being carried on today by Skylar and Prism Circuits. I think that idea that Serge really was trying to democratize it and make it something that everybody could have, that anybody who wanted it could afford. I don't think that Mort, I never had the feeling that Mort was ever in the business of selling booklets.
No.
It was never, with Mort's music, it was never, with a lot of synthesizer stuff, you feel like, oh, look at what this machine can do, this machine can do this, and this machine can do this. With Mort, I don't think that that's ever what's going on. I think it is always about him just using, it's a tool for him to make his music.
A funny
And-
story, when I was working with him, one of the envelope detectives, I guess, took a crap and he mailed it to Don and he got it back. And there was this box sitting on his old table where his 200 was. He brought his own system in for this 1/2 year. And he was like all excited and he's opening it up and he's like, God damn it. It was his box. He didn't even open it. Don just sent it back to him. He hadn't even touched it. So there wasn't, he wasn't selling Buka stuff, believe me, you know. But he told me that he did charge Serge in to develop a system for the kids in the school that they could have in their own homes. There's a person here that told me they don't want to be highlighted, but they were in that initial class of the first 20 systems that were ever built in this room right now.